The church bells tolled, a hollow sound that clawed at my chest, each chime a reminder of Ethan's absence. I stood in the back pew, staring at the altar where my brother's coffin should have been. But instead, white roses spilled over satin-draped chairs, arranged for a wedding that would never happen. My hands trembled as I clutched the crumpled invitation. Its words a cruel joke: Ethan Carter and Samuel Hayes, joined in love. I hadn't been back to Willow Creek in 3 years. Not since Ethan's car accident tore our family apart. The small Virginia town, with its quaint brick storefronts and whispering pines, felt like a museum of my grief. I'd fled to Chicago, drowning myself in graphic design work, trying to outrun the memories of my older brother, the one who taught me how to throw a punch, how to love fiercely, and how to hide who I really was. Now, I was back, summoned by a cryptic email from Samuel, Ethan's fiancé. Come home, Caleb. It's important. No explanation. Just those words and an attachment, the wedding invitation. I thought it was a mistake, a glitch in someone's grief-addled mind. Ethan was gone. There could be no wedding. But as I stood in the church, watching Samuel adjust a boutonniere on his navy suit, his eyes red-rimmed but resolute, I realized this was no mistake. Caleb, Samuel said, his voice low, cutting through the murmurs of the gathering crowd. He crossed the aisle, his steps deliberate, like he was carrying something heavier than himself. We need to talk. I froze. Samuel Hayes was a forestall, broad-shouldered, with a quiet intensity that made you feel seen and exposed all at once. He'd been Ethan's everything, the man who'd brought light to my brother's guarded heart. They'd met at a community theater rehearsal, Ethan directing, Samuel starring as a brooding Hamlet. Their love was the kind that made you believe in forever, even in a town where people whispered about those kinds behind closed doors. What is this, Sam? I asked, holding up the invitation. My voice cracked, betraying the anger and confusion bubbling inside. Ethan's gone. Why are you doing this? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he took my arm and led me outside, past the stained glass windows to the church's garden, where the air smelled of damp earth and fading summer. The crowd, friends, family, neighbors watched us go, their eyes heavy with pity and something else I couldn't place. This isn't just about Ethan, Samuel said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. It's about you, too. Me? I laughed, sharp and bitter. I'm not the one getting married. He looked at me then, his hazel eyes locking onto mine with a weight that made my breath catch. You are now, he said. The words hit like a punch, stealing the air from my lungs. I staggered back, my mind racing to make sense of it. Samuel wasn't joking. His face was all resolve, a man on a mission I didn't understand. What the hell are you talking about? I demanded. He pulled a folded letter from his pocket, the paper worn thin, like it had been read 100 times. Ethan wrote this before he died. It was for both of us. He handed it to me, his fingers brushing mine, lingering just a second too long. I unfolded the letter, my hand shaking. Ethan's handwriting stared back at me, familiar and gut-wrenching. Sam, Caleb, if you're reading this, I'm gone. But I need you to do something for me. Finish what I started. Love each other. Not just as family, but as something more. I've seen it, even if you haven't. My knees buckled. I sank onto a stone bench, the letter trembling in my grip. Ethan had known. He'd seen the way I looked at Samuel, The way my heart had betrayed me even as I buried my feelings under layers of guilt and denial. I'd loved Samuel from a distance. Not just as Ethan's partner, but as someone who stirred something in me I'd never dared name. Ethan wanted this, Samuel said, kneeling in front of me, his voice thick with emotion. He wanted us to have a chance, even if he couldn't. I shook my head, tears burning my eyes. This is insane. You can't just replace him. I can't. I'm not replacing him. Samuel cut in, his voice fierce. No one could. But I loved him. Caleb. And I see him in you. I've always seen you. The confession hung between us, raw and reckless. I wanted to run, to scream, to tell him he was wrong. But deep down, a part of Meth part that had spent years hiding, afraid of what it meant to love a man in a town like this, knew he wasn't. The church bells rang again, pulling me back to the present. The ceremony was starting soon. Guests were arriving, their faces a mix of confusion and curiosity. I looked at Samuel, at the letter, at the impossible weight of Ethan's last wish. I don't know if I can do this, I whispered. Samuel reached for my hand, his grip steady. You don't have to decide today. Just stay. Let's figure it out together. I nodded, unable to speak, my heart caught between grief and something terrifyingly close to hope. The wedding wasn't just for Ethan. It was for us. And as I followed Samuel back inside, I wondered if I could find the courage to step into the life my brother had left for me. The church was suffocating, its air thick with the scent of lilies and whispered questions. I sat in the front row, Samuel beside me, his knee brushing mine in a way that felt both accidental and deliberate. The altar loomed ahead, draped in white and gold, a stage for a performance I didn't sign up for. Ethan's letter burned a hole in my pocket. I hadn't let go of it since Samuel handed it to me, its words looping in my mind like a song I couldn't shake. Love each other. How could he ask that of me? How could he see something I'd spent years burying, even from myself? The officiant, a gray-haired woman named Reverend Claire, stepped forward. She'd known Ethan since he was a kid, sneaking into her Sunday school classes to debate theology instead of memorizing verses. Her smile was kind but strained as she addressed the small crowd. We're here to honor Ethan Carter's love, his life, and his wishes, she began. I shifted in my seat, my pulse racing. Honor his wishes. This wasn't a memorial. This was a wedding. And I was somehow the groom. Samuel leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. You okay? No, I muttered, barely audible. This is too much. He squeezed my hand under the pew, quick and hidden. I know. Just breathe. Reverend Claire continued, her voice steady but laced with emotion. Ethan and Samuel planned this day together. It was meant to be a celebration of their love. But Ethan left us too soon. And today, we're here to fulfill his final request. The crowd murmured, heads turning toward me. I felt their eyes like spotlights, exposing every crack in my composure. My mother, sitting 2 rows back, dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. She hadn't spoken to me since I arrived. Her silence a wall I didn't know how to climb. Dad was worse, his jaw tight, his gaze fixed on the floor, like he could will this whole thing away. Ethan left a letter, Claire said, holding up a copy. In it, he asked us to celebrate love in his absence, to bring 2 people together who share his spirit. She paused, her eyes finding mine. Caleb Carter, please stand. My heart stopped. Samuel nudged me gently, and I rose on unsteady legs, feeling like the ground might swallow me whole. The room was silent, save for the faint creak of pews and the rustle of fabric. Claire's gaze softened. Ethan believed in you, Caleb. He believed in the love you could build with Samuel. I wanted to bolt. This was a mistake, cruel, cosmic misunderstanding. But Samuel stood too, his presence anchoring me. He didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. Stay. Try. Claire turned to the crowd. This ceremony isn't what we expected, but it's what Ethan wanted. A union not just of two people, but of a promise to carry his love forward. A woman in the back, Mrs. Hargrove, the town librarian, stood abruptly. This is disrespectful, she snapped, her voice sharp enough to cut glass. Ethan's gone. You can't just swap one brother for another. The room erupted in whispers, some nodding in agreement, others looking away. My face burned, shame and anger twisting in my gut. Samuel stiffened beside me, but before he could respond, my mother's voice cut through the noise. Enough. She stood, her petite frame trembling but resolute. This is my son's wish. You don't have to understand it, but you will respect it. The room fell silent. Even Mrs. Hargrove sat down, her lips pursed. I stared at Mom, shocked. She hadn't spoken to me in years, not since I came out to her at 19. Not since she told me to fix myself before coming home again. Claire cleared her throat. Let's continue. She gestured for us to approach the altar. My legs moved on autopilot, Samuel's hand brushing my back, guiding me forward. The vows were simple, not traditional, but written by Ethan, read aloud by Claire. Do you, Samuel, promise to honor Ethan's memory by opening your heart to new love, to trust, and to heal? Samuel's voice was steady, but his eyes glistened. I do. And you, Caleb, do you promise to embrace this chance, to love fiercely, as Ethan did, even when it scares you? I couldn't speak. The weight of Ethan's words, of Samuel's gaze, of the town watching might was too much. But then I felt it, a spark, buried deep, the same one I'd felt years ago watching Samuel laugh with Ethan, wishing I could be part of their light. I do, I whispered, barely audible. The crowd exhaled, some clapping softly, others still skeptical. Claire smiled, tears in her eyes. Then let's celebrate this beginning, as Ethan would have wanted. The ceremony blurred after that music. Applause. A rush of faces offering congratulations or awkward condolences. Samuel and I stood together, not quite touching, but closer than we'd ever been. I didn't know what this meant. Not really. Was I in love with him? Could I be? Or was I just chasing Ethan's ghost? As we stepped outside into the fading daylight, Samuel turned to me. You didn't run, he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. Not yet, I replied, half joking, half terrified. He laughed, soft and real, and for a moment, I saw the man Ethan had loved, the man I might learn to love, too. But the weight of the town's judgment, my family's fractured past, and my own fear loomed large. This was only the beginning, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what came next. The reception was held in the old community center, a low brick building strung with fairy lights and paper lanterns. The air smelled of barbecue and honeysuckle, a small-town attempt at festivity that felt both comforting and surreal. I stood by the punch bowl, avoiding eye contact, while Samuel worked the room, shaking hands and accepting hugs like he wasn't carrying the same weight I was. Ethan's absence was everywhere. His favorite song, a soulful acoustic cover, played softly through the speakers, and I swear I could hear his laugh and the chatter. I wanted to hate this, to call it a mockery, but the effort everyone put in, the flowers, the food, the handwritten place cards, felt like love, not disrespect. Caleb. My mother's voice pulled me from my thoughts. She stood beside me, her graying hair pulled back, her eyes softer than I'd seen in years. Can we talk? I nodded, wary. We stepped onto the patio, the night air cool against my skin. She didn't look at me right away, her gaze fixed on the stars. I didn't understand, Ethan, she said finally. Not when he told me about Samuel. Not when he said he loved him. I thought it was wrong. Her words stung, old wounds reopening. I'd heard the same from her when I came out. Her voice cold, her Bible quotes sharper than knives. And now? I asked, my tone harder than I meant. She turned to me, tears glistening. I was wrong. About him. About you. I see that now. But it's too late for Ethan. Her voice broke. I don't want it to be too late for you. I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to hug her, to bridge the years of silence. Another part wanted to scream, to ask why it took Ethan's death for her to see me. Before I could decide, she touched my arm. What you did today? With Samuel, it's brave. Ethan would be proud. She walked away before I could respond, leaving me alone with her words and the ache in my chest. Brave. I didn't feel brave. I felt like a fraud, standing in my brother's place, pretending I could carry his love forward. Samuel found me later, leaning against the patio railing. You hiding out here? He asked, his tone light, but his eyes searching. Maybe, I said, forcing a smile. It's a lot. He nodded, leaning beside me. Yeah, it is. He paused, then added, your mom talked to me earlier. She's trying. Caleb. Trying doesn't erase the past, I said, sharper than I meant. No, it doesn't. He looked at me, his gaze steady. But it's a start. Like us. Us. I laughed, nervous. There's an us now. He didn't laugh back. Instead, he stepped closer, close enough that I could smell his cologne, cedar, and something warm. Like home. There could be, he said softly, if you let it. My heart pounded. I wanted to say yes, to lean into this impossible possibility. But fear clawed at me. What if I'm not enough? What if I'm just Ethan's shadow? Samuel's hand found mine, his touch grounding. You're not his shadow, Caleb. You're you. And I see you. The words hit harder than I expected, cracking something open inside me. I didn't pull away, but I didn't move closer either. We stood there, hands clasped, the night stretching out around us. The rest of the reception passed in a blur, dancing, toasts, laughter that felt both genuine and forced. By the time we left, my head was spinning. Samuel drove me to his house, Ethan's house. Really, a small craftsman bungalow they'd bought together. I'd agreed to stay the night, too exhausted to face the motel. Inside, the house was a shrine to Ethan. His books lined the shelves. His artwork hung on the walls. I stopped at a photo of the three of us, taken at a lake 2 summers ago. Ethan's arm was around Samuel, his grin wide, while I stood slightly apart, smiling but distant. You miss him, Samuel said, coming up behind me. Every day? I admitted. But being here, it's like he's still here. He is, Samuel said. In you. In me. In this. He gestured to the space between us. Undefined, but heavy with possibility. I turned to face him. My heart racing. Sam, I don't know how to do this. I don't know if I can love you the way he did. You don't have to, he said, his voice soft but firm. Just love me the way you do. The words hung there. An invitation and a challenge. I didn't answer. Not yet. But as we stood in the quiet of Ethan's house, I felt something shift, a spark of courage. A whisper of hope. Maybe. Just maybe. I could try. Morning light filtered through the bungalow's curtains, casting soft shadows across the living room where I'd slept on the couch. Samuel was already up, the smell of coffee pulling me from a restless sleep. I found him in the kitchen, flipping pancakes. His movements easy but his eyes distant. You didn't have to cook, I said, rubbing sleep from my eyes. He shrugged, a small smile breaking through. Ethan always said pancakes fix everything. The mention of Ethan tightened my chest, but I forced a nod. He wasn't wrong. We ate in silence, the weight of yesterday's ceremony lingering like fog. I kept stealing glances at Samuel, trying to read him. Was he doing this out of obligation? Grief? Or was there something real between us? Something Ethan had seen before I did. After breakfast, Samuel suggested a walk. Clear our heads, he said. We ended up at Willow Creek Park, the same place Ethan used to drag us for picnics. The air was crisp, the leaves crunching underfoot. We stopped by the creek, its water glinting in the sunlight. I used to come here with him, Samuel said, staring at the water. We'd talk about the future kids, travel, growing old together. His voice cracked. Now it's just quiet. I wanted to comfort him, but words felt inadequate. Instead, I picked up a flat stone and skipped it across the creek, the way Ethan taught me. He was always better at this, I said, watching the stone sink after 2 hops. Samuel laughed, soft and sad. Yeah, he was. He picked up a stone and skipped it, getting 4 clean hops. But you're not bad. We spent the morning there, skipping stones, sharing memories of Ethan. It felt good, like a small piece of him was with us. But as the sun climbed higher, Samuel's mood shifted. He sat on a bench, his hands clasped tightly. Caleb, I need to tell you something, he said. About the accident. My stomach dropped. I'd avoided asking about Ethan's crash, the details too painful to face. What about it? He took a deep breath. It wasn't just an accident. The police, they found evidence someone tampered with his brakes. The world tilted. What? I whispered, my voice barely audible. They never found who did it, Samuel continued, his jaw tight. But Ethan had been getting threats. Anonymous notes. Calls. Someone didn't want us together. Anger surged through me, hot and sharp. Why didn't you tell me? I didn't want to drag you into it, he said. You were already hurting. But now, with this wedding, with us, I'm scared. Caleb, what if they come for you, too? The fear in his eyes was real, and it shook me. I'd thought this was about grief, about love, but now it was something darker. Who would do this? I asked. I don't know, he admitted. But Ethan was outspoken. He didn't hide who he was, not even when people in town made it clear they didn't approve. I thought of Mrs. Hargrove's outburst at the ceremony, the whispers I'd heard growing up, the way my father's friends stopped inviting us over after Ethan came out. Willow Creek was small, its heart both kind and cruel. We need to find out, I said, my voice steady despite the fear clawing at me. For Ethan. Samuel nodded, relief flickering in his eyes. Together. Together. I agreed. We spent the afternoon digging through Ethan's old emails, notebooks, anything that might hold a clue. In his desk, we found a stack of letters, some crumpled, others unopened. They were vicious slurs, threats, warnings to leave town or else. My hands shook as I read them, each word a knife to my heart. Whoever did this, I said, my voice low. They're still out there. Samuel's hand found mine, his grip tight. We'll find them. But we have to be careful. That night, we sat on the porch, the air heavy with the weight of what we'd uncovered. I looked at Samuel, his face lit by the porch light, and felt something shift. Not just fear, but a need to protect him, to fight for what Ethan had wanted for us. I'm in, I said, my voice firm. Whatever this ISIS, this fight I am in. He smiled, small but real. Good. Because I don't want to do this without you. The words warmed me, even as the shadow of danger loomed. For the first time, I felt like I wasn't just honoring Ethan's wish, I was choosing it. The next morning, I woke to the sound of shattering glass. My heart leapt into my throat as I bolted upright on the couch. The bungalow's quiet replaced by chaos. Samuel was already at the front door, his face pale, a brick in his hand, its jagged edges glinting with shards of the broken window. Stay back, he said, his voice low but urgent. He stepped outside, scanning the yard. I followed, ignoring his warning, my pulse racing. The street was empty, the early morning fog cloaking any sign of the culprit. Taped to the brick was a note, scrawled in sharp, angry letters, "You're next." My blood ran cold. Samuel's hand tightened around the brick, his knuckles white. "This is about us," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "About what we did at the church." I took the note, my hands trembling. The handwriting was different from the ones we'd found in Ethan's desk, but the venom was the same. Someone in Willow Creek didn't just disapprove, they wanted us gone. "We need to go to the police," I said, though the thought made my stomach churn. The local sheriff, Tom Bradley, was an old friend of my father's, and I'd heard his snide comments about Ethan and Samuel at barbecues years ago. Samuel shook his head. They didn't help Ethan. They called the threats pranks and closed the case. His eyes darkened. "We're on our own." I wanted to argue, but the note in my hand felt like proof he was right. We cleaned up the glass in silence, the weight of the threat settling over us like a storm cloud. By noon, we were back at Ethan's desk, sifting through more of his things, desperate for answers. We found a journal, its pages filled with Ethan's neat handwriting. Most entries were about Samuel Love notes, plans for their future, but one caught my eye. Dated a week before the accident. Met with J. Hargrove at the diner. He was angry, said I was ruining the town, threatened to fix things if I didn't back off. J. Hargrove, I said, my voice tight. Mrs. Hargrove's husband. Samuel nodded, his jaw clenched. Jim. He owns the auto shop on Main. Ethan mentioned he'd been giving him trouble about the theater group, saying it was too progressive for Willow Creek. I remembered Jim Hargrove gruff, broad-shouldered, always with a cigarette dangling from his lips. He'd been at the ceremony, silent but glaring, his wife's outburst louder than his presence. "We need to talk to him," I said. Samuel hesitated. "Caleb, if he's involved, this could get dangerous." "I don't care," I snapped, anger overtaking fear. "If he had something to do with Ethan's death, I want to know." We drove to Hargrove's auto shop, the air between us tense. The shop was a squat, grease-stained building, its lot filled with rusted cars. Jim was there, wiping his hands on a rag, his eyes narrowing as we approached. "What do you want?" he growled, his voice rough from years of smoking. "We need to talk about Ethan," I said, holding up the journal. "You met with him before he died. You threatened him." Jim's face hardened, but he didn't deny it. "Your brother was stirring up trouble. This town doesn't need his kind of influence." "His kind?" Samuel stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You mean people like us?" Jim sneered. "You know what I mean. You and your little ceremony, parading around like it's normal. People here don't want that." I felt Samuel tense beside me, ready to lunge, but I grabbed his arm. "Did you tamper with his car?" I asked, my voice steady despite the rage boiling inside. Jim's eyes flickered, just for a second, but it was enough. "I don't know what you're talking about," he said, too quickly. "You're lying," I said, stepping closer. "And we're going to prove it." He laughed, cold and cruel. "Good luck, kid. You're in over your head." We left the shop, my heart pounding, Samuel's silence heavier than words. Back at the bungalow, we sat at the kitchen table, the journal open between us. "He knows something," I said. I saw it in his eyes. Samuel nodded. "We need more than a journal entry. We need evidence." That night, we made a plan. We'd watch Jim, follow him, see if he slipped up. It was risky, but I didn't care. Ethan deserved justice, and I was done running from the truth. As we sat there, plotting in the dim light, Samuel's hand brushed mine. This time, I didn't pull away. "I'm glad you're here," he said, his voice soft. I looked at him, my chest tight with something I wasn't ready to name. "Me too," I said, and for the first time, I meant it. The next few days were a blur of surveillance and suspicion. Samuel and I took turns watching Jim Hargrove's shop, parked in my rented sedan a block away, hidden by dusk and the town's sleepy rhythm. We didn't talk much, but the silence was comfortable, a shared purpose binding us closer than words could. On the third night, we got a break. Jim left the shop late, driving to a warehouse on the edge of town. We followed, keeping our distance, the headlights off to avoid detection. The warehouse was old, its windows boarded, the kind of place that screamed secrets. "He's meeting someone," Samuel whispered as we crouched behind a rusted dumpster. Sure enough, a second car pulled UPA black pickup I recognized as belonging to Sheriff Bradley. My heart sank. If the sheriff's involved, I didn't finish the thought. Samuel's face was grim, his hand gripping mine tightly. We watched as Jim and Bradley spoke in hushed tones, their gestures sharp, agitated. Jim handed Bradley an envelope, thick with what looked like cash. They parted quickly, Bradley driving off while Jim locked the warehouse door. We need to get in there, I said, my voice low but determined. Caleb, that's breaking and entering, Samuel warned. But his eyes betrayed his own resolve. For Ethan, I said, and that was enough. We waited until Jim was gone, then slipped around the back. The lock was old, easy to jimmy with a screwdriver from Samuel's car. Inside, the warehouse was a maze of crates and car parts, the air thick with oil and dust. We moved quietly, guided by the faint glow of a flashlight. In a corner, we found what we were looking for, a workbench littered with tools, brake fluid, and a notebook. I flipped it open, my heart racing. It was a log: dates, car models, names. Ethan's name was there, circled, with a date matching the week of his accident. Beside it, a single word: done. This is it, I whispered, my voice shaking. Proof. Samuel took a photo of the page with his phone, his hands steady despite the tension. We need to get this to someone outside Willow Creek, someone we can trust. But before we could move, headlights swept through the warehouse windows. We ducked behind a crate, hearts pounding, as footsteps echoed closer. It was Jim, back too soon, a flashlight beam cutting through the dark. Who's there? He barked, his voice sharp with suspicion. We held our breath, pressed close, Samuel's warmth a strange comfort in the chaos. The beam passed over us, missing by inches. Jim cursed, muttering about damn kids, and left, locking the door behind him. We exhaled, trembling, and slipped out the way we came. Back at the bungalow, we pored over the photo, the evidence burning a hole in our resolve. We can't stay here, Samuel said. If Jim's working with Bradley, they'll know we're onto them. I nodded, but my mind was racing. We need to confront them. Make them think we have more than we do. Samuel looked at me, worry etched into his features. That's dangerous, Caleb. So is doing nothing, I shot back. Ethan trusted us to finish this. He sighed, then nodded. Okay. But we do it smart. We spent the night planning, drafting a letter to the state police with the photo attached, keeping a copy hidden in Samuel's cloud drive. The next morning, we drove to the sheriff's station, the notebook photo burning a hole in my pocket. Bradley was there, leaning back in his chair, a smirk on his face. What's this about, boys? He asked, his tone dripping with false friendliness. I held up my phone, the photo of the notebook clear on the screen. This is about Ethan's murder, and we know you're involved. His smirk vanished, replaced by a cold stare. You're making a big mistake, Carter. Maybe, I said, standing taller. But we've got evidence, and it's already with the state police. You're done. Bradley's face paled, but he recovered quickly, laughing. You think you can scare me? This town protects its own. Not anymore, Samuel said, his voice like steel. Not when it comes to Ethan. We left the station, adrenaline pumping, knowing we'd just painted targets on our backs. But as we drove away, Samuel reached for my hand, his grip steady. We're doing this, he said. Yeah, I replied, my heart racing for reasons beyond fear. We are. The fallout came faster than we expected. By noon, the state police had descended on Willow Creek, their cars lining Main Street, lights flashing. Samuel and I watched from a diner across from the sheriff's station, our coffee growing cold as Bradley was let out in handcuffs, his face a mask of fury. Jim Hargrove was next, dragged from his shop, shouting about his rights. The town buzzed with gossip, neighbors clustering on sidewalks, their whispers a mix of shock and denial. I felt a grim satisfaction, but it was tempered by the weight of what we'd lost to get here. "They'll fight this," Samuel said, his voice low. "They've got friends in high places." "Then we'll fight harder," I replied, meeting his gaze. His eyes held something new, pride. Maybe. Or something deeper. We returned to the bungalow, exhausted but wired. The state police had taken the notebook photo and promised an investigation. But we weren't naive. Small towns had long memories, and we just burned bridges with half of Willow Creek. That night, my mother showed up at the door, her face pale but determined. "I heard what you did," she said, stepping inside. "About Ethan." I braced for her judgment, but instead, she pulled me into a hug, her arms trembling. "I'm so sorry, Caleb. For everything. I should have been there for you. For him." Tears stung my eyes as I hugged her back, years of pain melting into something softer. "You're here now?" I said, my voice thick. She stayed for dinner, the three of us talking late into the night. It wasn't perfect, there were still apologies to be made, wounds to heal, but it was a start. As she left, she squeezed Samuel's hand. "Take care of him," she said, nodding toward me. Samuel smiled, a quiet promise in his eyes. "I will." After she was gone, we sat on the couch, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. I looked at Samuel, really looked at him, and saw the man who'd loved my brother, who'd fought for him, who was now fighting for me. "Sam," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "What are we doing? Really?" He turned to me, his expression soft but serious. "We're figuring it out. One day at a time." I nodded, my heart pounding. "I'm scared," I admitted. "Not just about the investigation, but about us." He reached for my hand, his thumb brushing my knuckles. "Me too. But Ethan saw something in us, and I trust him. Don't you?" I thought of Ethan's letter, his belief that we could love each other, not as a replacement, but as something new. "Yeah," I said. "I do." He leaned closer, and for a moment, I thought he might kiss me. But he didn't, just rested his forehead against mine, our breaths mingling. "We'll get through this," he said. The next few days were a whirlwind. The state police found more evidence, tools in Jim's shop matching the tampering on Ethan's car, bank records linking Bradley to payments from local businesses opposed to Ethan's activism. The case was building, but so was the town's resentment. We got glares at the grocery store, cold shoulders at the gas station. One night, a rock came through the window again, this time with no note, just a warning. Samuel wanted to leave, to start over somewhere new. But I wasn't ready. "This is Ethan's home," I said. "We can't let them win." He looked at me, a mix of frustration and admiration in his eyes. "You're stubborn. You know that." "Learned it from Ethan," I shot back, and we both laughed, the sound a small rebellion against the fear. As the investigation deepened, so did our connection. We cooked together, shared stories, sat on the porch under the stars. I started to see Samuel not just as Ethan's love, but as someone who could be mine. It wasn't easy, guilt still gnawed at me, the sense that I was betraying Ethan, but every touch, every smile, chipped away at that fear. One evening, as we sat by the creek, Samuel turned to me. "I don't want to push you," he said, "but I need to know, are you in this for real?" I looked at him, the man who'd stood by me through grief and danger, and felt something settle in my chest. "I'm in," I said, my voice steady. "For real." He smiled, and this time, he did kiss me soft, tentative, but full of promise. It wasn't Ethan's love we were chasing anymore. It was ours. Months passed, and Willow Creek changed, slowly but surely. The state police closed the case, charging Jim Hargrove and Sheriff Bradley with Ethan's murder. The evidence was overwhelming: tools, bank records, even a confession from a guilt-ridden accomplice, a mechanic who'd worked for Jim. The town reeled, forced to confront its own complicity in the hatred that had festered for years. Samuel and I stayed, despite the whispers and the occasional cold stare. We fixed up the bungalow, painting the walls, planting flowers in the yard, a quiet act of defiance. Ethan's presence lingered, but it wasn't heavy anymore. It was warm, like he was cheering us on. My mother became a regular visitor, bringing casseroles and stories of Ethan as a kid. She was trying, and so was I. We didn't talk about the years of silence. Not yet, but we were building something new. My father was slower to come around, but he showed up one day with a toolbox, offering to fix the porch step. It was small, but it was enough. One spring morning, Samuel and I sat on the porch, coffee mugs in hand, watching the town wake up. The air was soft, the kind of day Ethan would have loved. I looked at Samuel, his face relaxed, a smile tugging at his lips. "What?" he asked, catching my stare. "Just thinking," I said, "about how we got here." He reached for my hand, his fingers lacing with mine. "Ethan brought us here, but we chose to stay." I nodded, my chest tight with gratitude. Ethan's letter had been a spark, but the Seuss was something we'd built, day by day, through grief and fear and love. That afternoon, we walked to the creek, the place where so much had started. I carried a small wooden box, carved with Ethan's initials. Inside were his favorite Thinks a Theater ticket stub, a photo of us as kids, a note he'd written to Samuel. We buried it by the water, a quiet goodbye, not to his memory, but to the pain we'd carried. As we stood there, Samuel slipped his arm around me. "I love you, Caleb," he said, his voice steady, certain. I turned to him, my heart full. "I love you, too." It wasn't the wedding Ethan had planned, but it was the life he'd wanted for USA, life of love, fought for and won. We weren't just honoring his wish anymore. We were living it. The town would never be perfect, but neither were we. We'd found something real, something worth fighting for. And as we walked back to the bungalow, hand in hand, I knew Ethan was smiling somewhere, his heart woven into ours.